This is Joe Moore coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. Today on the show, we have Plant Medicine Law Group, and they've been great friends so far. Really appreciate getting to know all of them, and they've actually even contributed to this upcoming kind of religious liberties in the United States kind of panel I've done with some other really great lawyers. So just really thankful for their friendship and for their contribution to the field. It's really just great getting to know them all and seeing the great work that they are going to do. Really great role models for us and quite active. So thank you all for doing what you do. Really excited to see more and see your firm grow. And I can't wait to meet you all in person once we can do conferences or something again. All right. Yeah, so thank you all for joining the show. And I hope we can do more podcasts in the future. And check out Plant Medicine Law on Google. They're on a bunch of socials as well. Quite active on LinkedIn, which is great. And just excited to see what the future holds for them. And all right. Again, check them out, Plant Medicine Law Group on Google, and you'll get there. Before we dig in, we have our next edition of Navigating Psychedelics coming up on the 22nd of July. And in this course, we go over all sorts of fun stuff, from how to be safe with psychedelics and other drugs, and how to kind of understand and navigate the psychedelic experience. And we have a whole mess of masterclasses from various experts in their particular domains. So we wanted to get a good smattering of people who have worked on the clinical trials, people who have spent a lot of time in ayahuasca spaces. And we even have one gentleman, recent guest on the show, who's been to probably more retreat centers than anybody I know and worked at them too. So really great to see all that. And I think it's one of the best foundations courses out there. So if you need a foundation before you understand where you want to build your stair set to, come check us out, Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists. It is about 45 hours total of training, 12 hours of live contact time with Kyle and I in class. And we usually have some surprise guest speakers. Raquel Bennett and Pierre Bouchard have been past guest speakers. And we even had this amazing gentleman from Oakland, Aize, join us a week or two ago to talk about intercultural sitting. So he's an African-American gentleman. And how would a white person go about sitting for Black people more appropriately? What do we need to know, and how open do we need to be? And it was just an amazing masterclass. Kind of totally surprised me. I shouldn't have been surprised because I knew he was amazing already, but it was just an extraordinary experience having him in class and having him help us through that as a big group. Yeah, so it's an amazing class. CE available for therapists, nurses, and psychologists. Those credits are probably transferable to other professions as well, but you should check with your licensing board first. And we get all that info on our website. So psychedelicEducationCenter.com or psychedelicstoday.com to learn more. And we hope to see you there. All right. I guess that's it for this intro. I hope y'all enjoy this episode of Plant Medicine Law Group, and we'll see you on the other side. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Today on the show, we have some fantastic people from the newly formed Plant Medicine Law Group. How are y'all doing today?
We're good. We're happy to be here with you, Joe.
Very excited. I'm a big fan of your podcast.
Oh, awesome. Glad to hear that.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, 100%. So we have Hadas, Adriana, and Serena. Are you is that the totality of the partners at the firm at this point?
It is indeed.
Cool. So I guess, like any good kind of superhero story, like how did this idea come about for you all to form this new group?
Well, I can start off by sharing how and when we met. I was introduced to Serena via email because she wanted to talk about psychedelic law. And then I met Adriana at an event where she was protesting a manel. Shocking. And I like heard her talking about, I either heard her talking about how the whole panel was white men or talking about Juhu Tokes. And I was like, who is that? She has fun bangs and cool glasses and she's talking about things I like. And so then we connected, exchanged information. And then I think that this was one of those moments where I wish I could take credit for this, but it was really just the universe doing its thing. I scheduled a meetup with Adriana for the first time ever. And then right after, like consecutively, I had scheduled a time to hang with Serena for the first time, like down the block. And so Adriana and I, unsurprisingly, our hangout went way over our allotted time. So she came with me to the bar where I was meeting Serena, and we all like briefly connected in, I think it was the Meatpacking District right before the pandemic, and then dispersed because of COVID. And I'll hand it off to someone else now, but that's how we met.
And then fast forward a few months, like we reconnected again, and there was a lot of discussion about advocacy, legislative advocacy to try to change the regulations surrounding psychedelics. And then the opportunity to like start this law firm was introduced to us by Hadas. And the idea was like, you see a lot of men, and particularly white men, in this space, and there weren't a lot of women that we were exposed to, that we were like, we're so passionate about this area, but we aren't seeing people who are like us talking about psychedelics. And also not only that, like advocating for the changes in the law with respect to psychedelics. And the more we got to talk, the more we realized like our ethos are really aligned, our values are aligned, and what we see and imagine how the space will unfold and grow was very much like, it was a great brainstorming session to see like how we want to imagine the space to be like eventually, and what our roles would be to advocate and to help guide other people and other entities build that reality.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think you addressed it, but manel is an all-male manel, and it seems like typically all white. And this is a big problem in the conference circuit in general, most specifically here in the psychedelic world, though. I can remember at least a couple of them.
So I'll gladly speak to that topic.
Sure.
So a manel is an all-male panel, and a wanel is an all-white panel. And I think that, it's something that's interesting. We were talking about it earlier in preparation for this conversation. The tension that sometimes exists between activism and psychedelia, right? Let's say that as a rough stereotype, psychedelic zens you out and makes you see the world as one and how we're all connected. And then the anger that comes with activism, we need a little bit of that to power change in the world. And so that's a topic. I'm out there protesting my manels. Serena runs the fabulous Instagram account Women in Psychedelics, which is putting on people's radars the stories and the potential speakers in the world. And Hadas is, fighting for legislative change. So I think that that's an interesting tension that our law firm encompasses as well, is how to like be zen and a cool cucumber, but also fight for change.
I also think, to me, the fight for change, the way that it kind of aligns with what I like to call my best self, who is calm and not angry, is that it doesn't have to be adversarial. It's, you have to protest a manel because that's how you get attention and get things to change, but it doesn't have to come from a place of anger, and it's not about vengeance. I actually think Tina Fey explains the need for gender diversity and really all kinds of diversity really well when she talks about her experience writing for Saturday Night Live. And she was the only woman in the writer's room when she first started there. And she would bring these ideas for sketches that were they were about things that only women really know about and therefore would think are funny.
Mm-hmm.
Things about like what happens to you when you're pregnant, or like
Mm-hmm.
periods or stuff like that. And she would bring these comments and or jokes, and no one thought that they were funny. And so they wouldn't get on the show. And then like the viewers who are women wouldn't have comedy that resonated with them as women per se. And then once more women got added into the writer's room, there was an audience for these women forward sketches. And so these women forward sketches got onto the show. And then there was like comedy that was specifically geared towards women being broadcasted on SNL. And that resonated out with the viewers. And I think that if that's important for comedy, imagine how important that is for medicine that is dealing with human consciousness and human souls. We've got to have, we just have to have representation.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, like if it's not going to be a very inclusive world if you don't have representation, and it's pretty simple logic. Yeah, so I really applaud the efforts and thank you for doing it. It's certainly like we had an intention in our very early days of trying to at least do 50-50 male-female. And I looked at some of our recent podcasts and I noticed like, oh, cool, we had like 3 women in a row. That was awesome. But in certain stretches of our history, like it wasn't possible for whatever reason. So we're definitely focused on that. And I'm glad that you're out there pushing it too, because our movement really needs this.
You can always count on us for suggestions.
Great.
And I also want to add that, like, as we're trying to advocate for inclusion and representation, there's also another aspect of like, let's create the reality that we want to see and we imagine and envision. So one of my struggle is that sometimes like there aren't women in the pipelines, right? If there are women in the pipelines, there's also time that they're not recognized, they don't have a seat at the table. But if there aren't women in the pipelines, to use as an example, sometimes I'm just going to create that environment for the things I want to exist to happen. So, for example, for me, being Chinese American, I don't see a lot of Asians in the psychedelic space. And it was hard for me to come forward and be public about coming out with this law firm, as well as coming out with my own story about my experiences. But the thing is, I thought if I'm not saying something and I'm waiting for someone else to say it, then I can wait a very long time. So instead of waiting, why don't I become that person that I'm hoping to model after or like look up to? And from that experience, now I've just started to build more like a larger community and connecting with people who are Asian, who I share a lot of similarities with. And we're having a lot of conversations and trying to figure out like, how do we bring the Asian American community into this space, or like, how do we integrate into this space, and how do we create a community that's going to serve us instead?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, like really, it's great that you had the ability and time to do that. Like, really, culture is pretty sick. We have to create these new little places for us to fit in. And not everybody has the resources or ability to do that. So thank you for, pushing that. So how long have you all been paying attention to the psychedelic world?
Let's see. So when I guess I became aware of psychedelics personally and experientially when I was working at Jewish summer camp in Yosemite. I was on a day off, and someone had the incredible idea of going on a journey to some gorgeous lake and having a little trip. And I think because my initial introduction was just so beautiful and I don't know. I mean, there's something really idyllic about Yosemite and about summer and about Jewish summer camp. Instantly, there was a relationship formed between me and these medicines that was very friendly. And it continued that way. And I think my relationship with plant medicine specifically really started in law school. I was having such a hard time on so many levels. And it just really, it helped me, one, learn how to pray, because that was my practice. That was what I did in ceremony. And I think by learning how to pray with the assistance of medicine, I got so much clarity on what was happening for me, and what I should do to sort of straighten myself out and be walking on the path that I needed to be walking on. And yeah, I mean, I think that those were two of the big milestones for me. And I think that the third was sort of a remembering when decriminalized nature started having successes all over the country. And I got approached about founding a chapter in New York City. And it just felt like this instant, heartfelt, full body, yes, let's go. I want to re-engage with this space I'm ready to re-engage with this space that's been really personal for me in a way that's now political. And then eventually, became professional.
That's outstanding. Adriana, how about you?
So my longest relationship and my primary relationship has been for a long time, cannabis. And professionally started thinking about cannabis, I'd say about 9 years ago, when I was thinking about what my second book was going to be about. And I love the gray area between design, sociology, consumer behavior, business, and politics. So the kind of what was pinging on my radar were the changing aesthetics of the cannabis industry, and how, to me, that was a packaging and photography and marketing language is often a reflection to me of a much bigger cultural shift. And I thought at the time that I was going to write another book called Rebranding Pot, and kind of look at case studies and what these new brands were trying to create in terms of new markets and new conversations. And psychedelics as a conversation fell on my radar more intellectually and experientially at Summit at Sea, which was a pretty interesting conference on a cruise ship. Tech and business and culture leaders, and Esther Perel was the lead lecturer, and George Schmidt of Google, and Kendrick Lamar singing. And I remember attending a lecture about psychedelics in that context of that conference, and just thinking to myself, this is an important data point, that there is, that now a conference like this one is incorporating these conversations. The night that, that was also the day that Trump won. So I knew I was not going to go back to working for the federal government, which I had since been in government under the Obama administration, and was planning on returning under the Clinton administration if she had won. And I took very seriously the FBI due diligence form, and wanted to continue being truthful and saying, no, I had not tried any of these substances. And then that night I was like, fuck it, Trump won, let's go. And ended up having a very surprisingly Jewish, funny, really wonderful experience on that cruise ship with some people that are dear to my heart. And then the data point number 2 that fell on my radar also in 2016 was the existence of the River Styx Foundation, and just seeing some of the grant making that was already in the pipeline made me say, okay, there's something bigger here to be looked at.
Awesome. And yeah, that was a pretty cool event. The the cruise ship situation. I heard a lot about it. Was a little envious, but I'm okay with it now.
I'll hook you up.
Serena, how about yourself?
So I've heard about LSD when I was in college, not really knowing what it was. And over the years, I think I just follow a lot on the clinical and the scientific research on LSD, as well as other substances. Like, I follow MAPS over the years, and watching it from the peripheral, I eventually, I work with a doctor who introduced me to ketamine assisted psychotherapy as well as ayahuasca. And I went and had multiple ceremonies with ayahuasca in Costa Rica. And I've seen personally experienced the therapeutic potentials of these psychoactive substances when used in an appropriate set and setting with people who know what they're doing. And so even though I've just been learning a lot from readings and just following what MAPS is doing, what other institutions are doing, like I got super excited back in 2014 or 15 when I learned about LSD being used for to treat cluster headaches, for example. Like that was super exciting to me. And now there's an explosion of data points regarding to the efficacy for treating a lot of mental health conditions like depression, PTSD, anxiety, etc. And for me, I suffer from depression from a young age, and I didn't have the vocabulary nor the tools to help me figure that out. So with my doctor, I was really able to focus the treatment on depression, but not on like the root causes of my depression. And over time, I've just there's just so many paradigm shifts that's occurred from learning about the neuroscience of these psychoactive drugs, and as well as the spiritual side of it, the religious side of it, and how it all applied to me. And it just led to a couple years ago me realizing, like, you know what, I really want to use my skill set as an attorney to legalize or decriminalize or somehow liberalize access to these substances, because I've seen what good it has done for me. So I want more people to have access. And that's where my professional interest began.
It's amazing. Really thankful for that. Yeah. Cool. Serena, can you give a little bit of your background, your personal biography? I think yours is quite interesting. Not that the other two aren't.
What do you mean? Well, I mean, I'm a first generation immigrant, come from a Chinese American family. Well, I identify as Chinese American. My family is still considered Chinese. I think what's interesting in my journey is that I am speaking out now about depression intentionally, because in the Chinese American community, it's really difficult to talk about mental health. And it's really difficult to get support from my families or my friends, just because there's a lot of stigma surrounding mental health, even though that's starting to change now on a very slow basis. And it felt like I was doing this alone for a very long time, trying to figure out, what do I need? Who do I need to see? How to even talk about all of this? And eventually, until I met my current doctor, it was just a really difficult time trying to figure everything out myself, like reading books, psychology books, all of that. But in some ways, like, my experiences has helped given me the courage to talk about the mental health, to try to like advocate for changing the stigma around mental health as well as drug use, right? Because Asian Americans or Asians in general, you think this model minority stereotype says that we follow certain rules, we're good at math, we're smart, we're just going to follow rules and do what we're told. But that's not really true. Like, a lot of Asian Americans suffer in their own ways, and people do use drugs, and different generations have different perspectives towards drugs. And my generation, my peers, either are like, no, those are bad, I'm not going to touch it, or they are using drugs, but just doing it underground. And yet at the same time, it's like we're not really talking about how we can use these psychoactive substances and intentionally using it for healing. There are people doing that, and I'm always searching for those people. But the majority of us, like, it's like you're using it for fun, or you're just exploring yourself. But it's just, I feel like there needs to be more conversations about mental health, drug use, using psychedelics, and seeing how all of that can help somebody enrich their life.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really important point. And did you have a certain kind of background in like a religious freedom avenue?
So that's an area I'm really interested in from the legal perspective, just because
Mm-hmm.
equitable access to these medicine is not just going to be in the clinical setting. It's going to be somewhere. Some people are going to want to use this for spiritual purposes. So I've been doing a lot of research and worked with a client with Religious Freedom Restoration Act issues, and I'm going to continue to work in that area.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I think that's a really important point. Like this whole thing, this is going to be a really large ecosystem. And I don't believe we want it dominated by psychiatrists. And I've talked to a few psychiatrists who don't really want to own psychedelics. So I think that's a really, really great point. And I think that's perhaps, Adriana, why we're both kind of working on these different religious projects. Do you want to maybe speak about what you're up to, Adriana?
Sure. So as Serena and Hadas mentioned, this law firm came together in interesting ways. It's very much a pandemic story. We launched on November 4th. It happened to be the perfect timing for each of us in our separate lives to come together. There have definitely been silver linings to launching a law firm, both efficiency-wise and cost-wise during the pandemic, where everybody has shifted, schmoozing to the virtual. But one of the things that happened was when I lost a job offer at the beginning of the virus, the two things I contemplated were either starting this law firm or getting a PhD at the Jewish Theological Seminary on Jews and psychedelics. Just kind of asking the question in a more sophisticated way, why are there so many Jews in cannabis? Why are there so many Jews in psychedelics? What is it about Jews and drugs? And obviously we all know what happened. I co-founded a law firm and did not get a PhD, but I guess the commitment to fold that interest into my life just stayed strong. And so without really having a strict agenda, the idea was just, let's bring together the different types of people who are working to figure out what a psychedelic religious future looks like for Jews, Christians, and Muslims. And not just focusing on clergy, recognizing that clergy or whoever would lead a ceremony, of course, they're important, but the psychedelic ecosystem for any of these faith groups requires everything from experiential designers to music historians to people who are thinking about food, to people who are thinking about the whole experience and harm reduction. So it's, yes, clergy and ceremony leaders will always be important, but I see it as a much broader ecosystem. And I'm fascinated by people who identify as Jewish, Christian, and Muslim and are actively exploring how psychedelics can be a part of those traditions.
Mm-hmm. Right. We had a fun conversation the other day, and we'll probably be revealing a lot more details over time, but there's this Christian angle I'm kind of covering, and it's only out of convenience, honestly. It's the religion I'm most familiar with. I maybe perhaps dabbled with it in my first 5 years of life. And don't currently identify with it. So it is interesting that I'm actually even doing it with the Christian topic.
I know. I already told you two things. One is that you can count on me for all kinds of collaborations and ideations and kind of thinking things through. And the other thing is, it always fascinates me when Christians can kind of check out of the hotel. Always, Jews don't really have that luxury. You can check in, but you can't really check out. So count on me for being a good sparring partner and a good support partner for all of your projects.
Awesome, including the struggle with Christian identity. It's interesting
I already
though.
told you what I think.
Oh, totally. Like this idea that like you can't get away from, being a Jew, right? But theoretically you can kind of hide it as a Christian. But as a Catholic, like I grew up Catholic, right? And as soon as you're baptized, it's done. According to some of them, though, I would fight that tooth and nail most of the time, I think. But yes.
Well, we'll only really know the answer at the pearly gates.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So there you go.
Yeah. Good call. Great. So this might be a complicated one, but since you're all experienced lawyers, you should be able to handle it well. Like, what kind of clientele is the firm going after? Are you looking at retreat centers, drug companies? What kind of stuff are you working on?
So I think that there's sort of two levels to the answer to that question. The first is the ethos of the clients we're looking for and why we're looking for them. My sense is that the three of us, we're attorneys, we've got life experience under our belt, and we're passionate about psychedelics. None of those things qualify us to decide what are the good companies versus the bad companies in the psychedelic space. I think that that's something that the market decides. That being said, there are varying degrees of equity when it comes to the on-ramps to entering that market. I think that starts with regulation, and I think that sort of contractor services to bolster individual founders or companies are a big part of that level playing field as well. And so sort of holistically, I think we want to step in and show up as attorneys that are really here for the companies that may not have like burst out the gates in the past couple of years with all the big investors and the super shiny brands, but really have a lot of heart and have something to bring and want to be of service. So within that broad umbrella, there's a lot of different segments within the industry that our clients come to us from. And I'll let Adriana talk a little more about that because she's the best at answering that question. But I'll just say, I think we're really interested in people and organizations that want to shift paradigms, people who are not overly committed to the status quo. And recently I've been seeing us as like this very strong, sturdy tree or like a tree branch. And our clients, sorry, I'm about to get super woo-woo. Our clients are like hummingbirds that are just flittering around and being creative and wonderful and sort of pollinating ideas and thinking up new ways to revolutionize all sorts of things. And we're just here and we're solid and we're not going anywhere, and they can rely on us for that support and that legal backbone.
And to piggyback on that, I think the word that we use most often, because it's the perfect one, is ecosystem. So anytime you talk about a psychedelic space, and whether you're talking about psychedelic medical therapies or psychedelic experiences, the reality is that all of these things will only be possible and safe if there is an entire ecosystem that has been built out and continues to build. And so that's everything from educational entities to certification entities to medical organizations that bring together pharmacists or clinicians or therapists, to media companies that share information, to biotech companies that are focusing on the medical angle, to retreat centers that are focusing on the experiential, to individuals who are dedicated to educating established doctors who have already finished medical school ages ago about the benefits of these new treatments. So it's really just like a city requires all kinds of buildings and transportation solutions, so does the psychedelic space. And when people ask us, what kind of clients we tend to work with, if you roughly divide the psychedelic ecosystem into companies that will never touch a substance, a Schedule 1 substance, or currently scheduled substance, Schedule 1 substance, and companies that touch the substances and will never touch the substances. We absolutely, the companies that don't touch the substances and will never touch the substances, they can start incorporating now. They can start fundraising. They can start building out websites. They can start teaching and organizing people. And they literally, like psychedelics today, right? You can just exist.
Yep.
In the bucket of companies that either already touch the substances or will one day touch the substances, what we see is we are already in conversations with companies that will one day, but don't currently touch. So they can fundraise, they can start branding, they can start getting all of their, their board documents in place and investors lined up. And what we look forward to working with one day are the biotech companies that are already touching the substances, are already running trials. And that's an audience that we haven't been in touch with as much, but we would very much like to be in conversation with.
Right. Very cool. Yeah, there's an incredible amount of biotech companies coming in. I'm sure you all are probably paying even closer attention, or especially you, Adriana, like this boom of companies. It's really intense. I don't know what to really make of it or do with it, but it's exciting to see just how much attention is coming here. Yeah. And I'm curious, Hadas, you mentioned this idea of kind of new paradigm, or maybe it was you, Adriana. Like, what is this new paradigm, or what might be an example? Like, I know Bennett Zellner's kind of pollinator model that he shared at Horizons, but what else is out there that's hopeful or interesting to you?
Yeah, Bennett and his pollinator model are great examples of that paradigm shift. So I think that there's a number of things. I would say something that has been on my mind quite frequently as an attorney is the adversarial nature of the legal system, and how inherently when you have, I think this is especially true in litigation, it's two sides against each other. And even when you're not, I mean, even in corporate law, I think for a long time, there's been this assumption that you want to get everything you can for yourself. Like a successful negotiation is being the first and the most and the best. And I don't know of many people who have gotten everything they want at the expense of being a good person in good relationship to themselves and the people around them and are happy. I think that, and I don't know a lot of companies who would follow that pattern as well, who are happy. And I think that the concept of win-win-wins, everyone gets to win a little bit in their own way, is so powerful to me. And it's not like this millennial thing of participation trophies. I think that's really silly. I'm talking about material wins. I think that, there's companies also outside of the psychedelic space that are now embracing the barter economy. They're doing pretty complex financial transactions that allow both parties to get something good, get something they need, get something of value. And if we're not all here exchanging value within the market, for goodness sake, what are we doing? And so there's that. There's the sort of shifting legal paradigm. I really hope to see one day, for certain types of disputes, psychedelic-assisted dispute resolution. I could see this working really well with certain types of family law. I would be very interested to see this in corporate settings, although I think we're a ways off. But I feel like this basic underlying concept of oneness is inherently at odds with the traditional Western legal system, because when it's you against someone else, that's it. That's bifurcated. That's two. So what would the law look like if we weren't two? If we were really treating each other as one? And I think that's, again, I think there's a long ways to go to see that put into practice on all different levels of legal culture, but I think even just restorative justice is this really great example of people taking really challenging and often complex situations and literally sitting in a circle for as long as it takes and having a mediator help them flesh out what was the harm and how can the victim be made whole and what can the offender do to fix it. And these models aren't just pie in the sky. They actually, they're effective. And I think that I hope we see more of that.
Cool.
That in the legal system.
Yeah.
And I may add,
please.
Coming from the religious freedom restoration in that area, there's a lot of cases that evaluate religious practice that tends to be coming from a lens of the three major religions, right? Or whatever the major religions are. So judges who are making these decisions, they grew up with certain traditions, and that's the viewpoint they bring in. And some of the conversations I've had recently, we're trying to figure out how do you change that framework so that's no longer a framework coming from Christianity, for example. And rather than evaluating on like, well, you don't have a text, you don't have something akin to the Bible, or you don't have clergymen, or you don't have priests, or like these indications of what is traditionally Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, but they're not existing in shamanic traditions or even like new minority traditions that people are creating. It's not very old, but they're coming from somewhere. And for some people, it's just the teachings are coming from plants. So when you have judges are making decisions, but they're kind of viewing it from a certain framework, then it's about how do you educate, how do you advocate for new traditions that actually exist in a different framework. And I think shifting the paradigm also comes from that advocacy too, is like trying to educate people to see the world from a very different perspective, which is what some people who are practicing these religions, like these exercises, they're trying to figure out like, how do I explain to you that this is sort of like Christianity, but not like Christianity, but we kind of believe similar things, but not really. So it's like, yeah, it's all packaging that in a way that will allow people to really expand their mind to accept more of these minority or esoteric or different types of religions.
That's really interesting. I just brainstorming like a series where the three of you kind of sit down with judges and like hash it out.
Let's go.
That's a really cool kind of angle, right? Like the judges have to get educated. If religion only looks like Christianity to them, then of course they're going to not know what to do with these other weirder looking things.
And courts do try to stay away from determining what is a religious exercise or not. But again, it's like some of the language seems in the case law seems to contradict that, because it's kind of like, well, when you start asking questions for certain indications, those indications are measured from a certain framework, and that framework are the big religions in the Western world, and other religions just don't fully fit into that framework as well, especially psychedelic religious exercise. Because when somebody says like, well, my teacher is the plant, would that be okay? Like, I'm not sure how judges would feel about that.
Right. Like, how do you even handle like a non-human entity having some sort of power like that? That's philosophically complicated. And I would hope they have the mental flexibility for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a major ontological shift. And I think, fortunately or unfortunately, the most direct way to getting to that shift is not through theory, it's through practice, it's through experience. And I think that actually makes me hopeful. Yeah. I think that as these conversations that we're having right now become more and more commonplace, my hope is that people's curiosity gets the best of them and they just try things.
Yeah.
Some of those curious people are judges. I would hope that the judges of this country had some curiosity in them.
Well, you kind of have to, right? Like what people might not understand about law generally is that it's kind of like applied philosophy in a lot of ways. And I don't know if that's a fair way to put it. What is it? Jurisprudence, is that like ruling without passion or something? Is that how you phrase it? It's a really interesting concept. Like how do we do this thing, the practice of it, how it all flows, the history of it.
Yeah.
It's like a really interesting thing. And having a philosophy background, I came close to going to law school. So I was like, oh, it's interesting. I have the skills. I'm kind of happy I didn't, because I ended up in a pretty interesting place anyway. But it's a really cool thing. So I would imagine some judges are curious.
Yeah.
As a result of that.
Yeah. And like, to go back to your point just briefly about law as philosophy and the practical application of philosophy, I just had this memory when you said that of being a first year law student and being in tort law and learning that which I guess should have been obvious, but there wasn't always a cause of action for the intentional infliction of emotional distress. Like there was assault and battery, physical harms, but the concept of an emotional harm just wasn't a legally cognizable concept. Like what's an emotional harm? And that wasn't that long ago. And just to think the fact that the law is able to evolve to keep up with the expansion of our ontological progress, our ontological vocabulary, it makes me hopeful.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this thing was developed to adapt.
Yeah.
Over time, somehow we survived the software boom, and like Edison and Tesla, we survived that, and now we have like a lot more left to do, which is really kind of cool. And it has to be kind of exciting for you all to be at the forefront of psychedelic law. Like there's a handful of folks involved right now, but you three being essentially a New York-based law firm with one of you in LA, like that's ground zero in a lot of ways.
Yes, short answer. It's so exciting. And one of the feelings I've really been relishing lately in connection to our practice is working with elders in this space and working at people who have been at the tip of the spear for so long, and people I used to read about and really respect, and knowing that they even know our names, but also that they support what we're doing and want to collaborate in some way. I think that the feeling like we are humbly a part of the continuation of a lineage. And like at this very moment, we're pushing the envelope in a very, we're moving the needle forward in a very specific way. And like we're standing on the shoulders of the coolest giants ever, not even like wizard giants who we sometimes even like get to talk to and scheme with. That's very exciting to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's part of one of my favorite places where I'm at too. Adriana, go ahead. Sorry.
Speaking of being excited, it's interesting that we're a law firm and that we internally have debates about, what comes first in terms of social change. Is it the chicken? Is it the egg? Is it laws or is it culture? And I definitely am the one that monitors contemporary culture and thinks that culture changes first and then laws follow. And one of the things that I have found so fascinating is I've been compiling a list of references to psychedelics in contemporary television shows, movies, music, and fashion. And I think that we're really seeing a moment in which on the negative side, you have a healthcare crisis, a mental health care crisis, and, a real proof that the current medical system is failing. us and that SSRIs are not the only answer.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, you're seeing cultural production that is normalizing or creating curiosity around psychedelics, such that a book like Michael Pollan's, it's not landing on an empty table of cultural production. There's a lot that's happening, even in music videos, that makes it so that a book like that creates a tipping point, but it's not the only thing that creates a tipping point that then creates the kind of momentum that, in my opinion, creates legal change.
There's so much there. Yeah. And I'm glad you're working on that. I heard you mention that the other day when we were on the call, but it didn't really hit me till now, like how impactful that could be. Yeah, I'm watching something the other day, like Owen Wilson just saying, "Are you on acid?" Just like the reference, like the fact that it even happened, while
Right.
a little ignorant, like it still injects a little bit of cultural juice or whatever into the equation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really neat. Well, I feel like we could go for 5 hours, but I'm kind of curious, like what's most exciting over the next, like maybe 6 months for you, for psychedelics generally, or we can expand that to the next 2 years if that's helpful. And maybe we can run through each of you.
I guess I can start. I'm extremely excited on two fronts. One is some of our contacts have started introducing us to companies in the psychedelic space that you could consider are creating ancillary products or ancillary services. And I've always been fascinated, both in the cannabis world and the psychedelics world, about these companies that are creating, everything from widgets to services that at first you wouldn't think about, but then once you hear about it, you're like, wow, that is so important. Thank God someone's doing it. And yes, I want to be their lawyer. So that's the number one thing I'm really excited about. The second thing that I'm really excited about is my working group, Faith and Delics, and kind of thinking about what kind of collaborations and what kind of interfaith conversations I can continue to stimulate. It's been a surprisingly fruitful and dynamic group, and I want to continue seeing it grow as more results come out from NYU and Johns Hopkins.
Very cool. And ancillary products. Immediately, this device, I think I have 5 of them at home. It's called the Toker Poker. Have you heard of this thing?
No, what is it?
Oh my God. It's like a stoner's essential tool. It's like it's got essentially like a straight little metal poker. Oh, your lighter fits in it. So it's always on your lighter. And then it can help. It's got a little thing that packs your bowl a little bit down, like tamper. And then like a poker to help you clean out your ash and stuff.
I used one of those for the first time very recently, and I don't know if it made my experience more challenging or actually better, but I felt very cool.
It's my girlfriend opened like one of the first pot shops here in Breckenridge, Colorado, like 2014 or whenever it became legal, and they were trying to get her to sell them, and she's like, $9? I don't know. And then she like took it home. She's like, I can't live without this anymore. I wish they were a sponsor of mine, but I think they're too small. But, maybe in the future. All right. Who's next here?
I can jump in. So
great.
I'm excited for every single one of our clients to see what they do and support them. And also to see like who else comes into our orbit in terms of clients, because like I was saying earlier, Joe, before we started recording, if we're interesting, it's just because we're just a reflection of how interesting our clients are. And then additionally, I'm partnering with the Brooklyn Psychedelic Society to direct a statewide decriminalization campaign that will be in New York that will be launched soon, later this month, actually. It's called Democratize Healing, and I'm going to be the policy director. Excited about that. And I had the honor of being asked to be on the founding board of the Psychedelic Bar Association, which is turning out to just be such an interesting experience of like taking lawyers from lots of different, let's say, orientations and perspectives along the legal spectrum, from like super out there to fairly conservative, and putting them on long Zooms every couple of weeks to have them decide all sorts of things. And it's been a trip, and I think it'll hopefully be a really helpful resource to people moving forward.
Yeah, the things I've heard about it are pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And this statewide decriminalization initiative, will it be kind of like decrim nature, like plant and fungi, or what are you looking at there?
I think that our campaign crush, if you will, is Measure 110 in Oregon. That was a full statewide decrim.
Yeah.
I think that's really ambitious for the shockingly conservative New York State legislature. But
they love the drug war over there.
They love the drug war. They haven't gotten the memo that drugs are winning. But they will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it like a really big negotiation where we're going to just come in swinging and ask for the biggest, best possible thing we can get. And then it'll be a lot of relationship building and trust building and finessing with the legislature and seeing where we land.
That's fantastic. I'm really excited for that. Yeah, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you, Colin, and whoever else to help publicize that once that gets rolling.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah. And how about yourself, Serena?
Yeah, I'm super excited for all the different permutations of various access points to psychedelic medicine as as the rules start to change, like starting with Oregon 2 years down the line. And I say different permutations because on one hand, you have people who want to create visionary churches. On the other hand, you've got biotech companies or clinical practice. And then there's also like things that could exist in between the two spectrum. That's on two extremes. That's how I've always envisioned the ecosystem to really start growing, is like you have different access points for different tastes, for different people, with different resources and whatnot. And I'm super excited that more and more people are talking about integration, especially some of the clients that we work with, because the way psychedelics work is that you have an experience, but that experience is really only the beginning of the journey. And the rest of the journey is about how do you make sense of that experience and how do you apply it and bring it and so-called integrate it into your daily life. And that's where a lot of the healing starts. So I'm excited to see what would happen in that space with some of our clients as well as with other people in this space. And I'm also super excited to have multiple conversations with the Asian American community as well as Asians in other diaspora countries to talk about bringing this to Asia or to our community, because we do need to work on reducing the stigma with respect to mental health as well as to drug use. I'm just kind of excited to see where that would take me and how it would unfold, because I know there are people interested in bringing these type of medicine, talking about it as if this is just another form of Chinese medicine, and then using it to help people in those countries, because the statistics there and the resources that's available is it's lacking.
So this is some rumor mill stuff, but I've heard rumor that a number of executives, very high level folks at Alibaba, were interested in opening a facility somewhere for psilocybin. And I think it was mainly for them and their friends. I don't know that it was going to be a real commercial venture or anything like that. So for what it's worth, there are people interested in this Claremont School of Theology in Claremont, California, that I was chatting about maybe before we were rolling. They, I think, have 36 process thought schools in China. And there's a chance there's an avenue, an entry to China there. But I like this idea of educating maybe traditional Chinese medicine practitioners about this topic and see if they might be able to kind of organically integrate it to their practice. But who knows? I know traditional means kind of slow, so perhaps that's not the right avenue. But I'm glad you're thinking about it, Serena. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, and it seems like we might have to talk a little bit more about Claremont, because I've heard that 10 therapists from China went through some training at MAPS, and that's really fascinating because I'm sure that...
I think I heard that too. I don't know where I read that though.
Yeah, so it's interesting because kind of in the US, a lot of people are becoming more and more comfortable talking about psychedelics and their own personal experiences. But that's not the case, I know, in Asia. So if anything is happening, it's all kind of hush hush and underground.
Totally. Yeah, a friend of mine in Hong Kong, he used to get just patted down by kind of sneaky police guys that would just grab him, bring him into the alley, say, "What do you have on you?" Thankfully, they never opened his phone because they would have found some crazy stuff there. But it's a scary environment with so much surveillance, and I hope we can make a difference despite that situation. The number of folks with serious psychological distress after the SARS situation years ago was really high, and this situation here is going to be even worse globally. So we're going to need some stuff to help us through this next 10 years, just to get our wheels back on, really, as a global civilization. So I think you all are there at just the right time to help negotiate this kind of crazy intersection of drug war and medicine and the rest of it.
And listen, we're happy to start another rumor that we are the perfect law firm for anyone at Alibaba that's thinking about doing anything.
Heard it here first.
Heard it here first. Call me. We'll make it work.
Seriously, that's a good move. Yeah. Alibaba, make it happen. I don't know that they're listening, but I hope so, though. Cool. So we're at about an hour. Was there anything else any of you felt interested in getting out there?
I'm thinking we talked about Hadas's decrim work, Serena's platforms. No, I think we've covered everything.
Whoa, cool. All right. So what is your website or some of your socials for people to check out?
So plantmedicinelaw.com. Hadas, is it law_plant on Twitter?
It is.
Cool.
Instagram, Plant Medicine Law Group, separated by
underscores.
Yes. Serena's Instagram is Women in Psychedelics. And I am Jew Who Tokes, or hashtag Jews and Delics.
Right. Very cool. Well, I'm excited for everything that's going on here. It's really cool. And thank you all for being on the show. And I hope we get to record with you as individuals in the near future.
You got it.
You got it.
You got it.
All right. There you have it. I hope you enjoyed that one. I did. I really am excited for these three ladies to be in the space and really excited to see what they can pull off. I love that they're across the U.S., New York and L.A. And I've heard of a number of folks working with them, and they've had a great time so far. So really, hope I get to work with them professionally in the future too. Though, how often are you hearing people say they want to work with lawyers? But I've had some good experiences lately. So looking forward to, more time with lawyers. And a lot of people out there are working on various psychedelic businesses, nonprofits, et cetera. It is really important to keep yourself safe, to have a good legal representation. And I know it's expensive, but it's really worth it. Prison, jail, courts, super duper expensive. You want to spend as little time in those places as you can for the most part. So if you can afford a lawyer, please do. Plant Medicine Law has been, haven't worked with them professionally yet, client attorney relationship, but I wouldn't be afraid to. And Yeah, please do check out this free legal series that we're putting together. You can get it at psychedeliceducationcenter.com, Religious Liberty in the United States. And it's got a bunch of lawyers talking about religious law in the United States, how to navigate it as an individual. There's stuff here for lawyers. There's also stuff here for non-lawyers who are interested in, the legal status, what's possible. Yeah, again, it's free, psychedeliceducationcenter.com. Should be doing a lot of promotion soon around that. So strap in for that. And again, July 22, Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists, our 8-week, 45-hour program, 12 hours of live contact time with Kyle and I. You'll have a Slack community you can hang on to forever in there. And you get access to all of these classes perpetually. Forever. And we do a money back guarantee. If you don't like it, you can get your money back. So we think you're going to love it. And that's how much we believe in it. I think it's 30 days maybe that you get your money back in. So please come down, check it out. And we think you won't regret it. And I guess worth noting, this is not just for clinicians and therapists. There's plenty of people who have taken this, including life coaches, sitters, professional sitters in the underground. We've had, just undergrads and grad students taking the course as well. Everybody's welcome. The thing to understand is that we're going to be speaking at a high kind of clinician's level. If you think you can keep up, come on down, hang out. You can do most of the education outside of class. You can watch the classes multiple times. The master classes you can watch multiple times. So yeah, come on, check that out too. psychedeliceducationcenter.com for more, or psychedelicstoday.com. Yeah, I think that's good enough for now, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore signing off. We will see you on the next episode in a few days. And thanks again to Plant Medicine Law Group. Bye-bye.